housemaid saves employer who couldn't swim, and what he does next shocks everyone. Denise Washington dropped the dishes she was washing when she heard desperate screams coming from the pool area. Her bare feet ran across the cold kitchen floor to the garden, where she found a scene she never expected to witness. Richard Peterson, the arrogant businessman who had humiliated her daily for 5 years, was flailing in the deepest part of the pool. His phone still floated near the edge, evidence that he had slipped during one of his endless business calls. The man who never missed an opportunity to remind her of her inferior position was now screaming for help, his designer clothes weighing him down like lead as the icy water filled his lungs. "Help! I can't swim." His voice came out broken between involuntary gulps of chlorinated water. Denise felt her heart race. For a moment, one she would never admit to anyone, the thought crossed her mind to simply turn away and pretend she hadn't heard anything. After all, how many times had that man treated her as if she were invisible? How many humiliations had she swallowed in silence to keep the job that supported her son Marcus through law school? But only for a moment. Without hesitation, Denise dove into the pool in her heavy uniform, feeling the fabric cling to her body as she swam toward her drowning employer. The water was colder than she expected, but adrenaline warmed her blood. Richard had already stopped struggling, his eyes rolling back as his body began to sink. Denise reached him just in time. She hooked an arm under his armpit and pulled him toward the edge, using strength she didn't even know she had. The man was heavy, but years of carrying grocery bags, moving furniture, and doing hard labor had strengthened her muscles in ways a sedentary life never could. "Calm down, Mr. Peterson. I'll get you out of there," she shouted, struggling to keep him afloat. Denise's lungs burned as she finally dragged him to the pool's edge. With great effort, she pushed him out of the water, her own body shaking from exhaustion and cold. Richard coughed violently, expelling water as he tried to regain consciousness. For a few minutes, the two of them lay there, gasping, soaked, with the midday sun slowly drying their wet clothes. Denise watched her employer's face, waiting for some sign of gratitude. Maybe even a simple thank you. After all, she had risked her own life to save his. When Richard finally opened his eyes fully and saw who had saved him, his expression wasn't one of relief or gratitude. Instead, his face twisted into a mix of anger and embarrassment that Denise knew all too well. It was the same look he gave whenever something displeased him. "You," he muttered, his voice still hoarse from swallowed water. Denise waited for him to finish the sentence, to say, "Thank you," or "You saved me." But Richard simply staggered to his feet, his expensive clothes dripping onto the marble floor, and walked toward the mansion without saying a single word. He didn't even look back. Denise stood there, still wet, still trembling, watching the man she had just saved disappear through the glass door of the house. The silence that followed was deafening. Only the hum of the pool filter and the distant chirping of birds in the garden remained. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us newcomers a lot. Now, continuing. That night, Denise couldn't sleep. Lying in her small studio apartment in Queens, New York City, she kept reliving the moment of the rescue. The words he hadn't said echoed in her mind like silent screams. Not even a thank you, not even a glance of acknowledgement, just the familiar contempt she knew so well. Marcus came home late from college, finding his mother still awake, staring out the window. "Mom, are you okay? You seem worried," said the 24-year-old, putting his books away on the small table that served as a desk. Denise hesitated to tell him what had happened. Marcus always got upset when she came home with stories about Richard Peterson's arrogance. The young lawyer, about to graduate, couldn't understand how his mother could tolerate so much humiliation. "It was just a tough day at work, son, nothing serious. Did Mr. Peterson give you trouble again?" Denise smiled sadly. Marcus knew her too well to be fooled. Let's just say today was different. The next morning, Denise arrived at work at her usual time, 6 a.m. The house was silent as usual at that hour. She grabbed the keys from the kitchen drawer and followed her routine, preparing coffee, arranging the newspapers on the office desk, and starting to clean the upstairs bedrooms. It was when she went downstairs to get the cleaning supplies that she found something that made her blood run cold. On the main entryway table, in plain sight, were all her personal belongings she kept in the house, the mug she used for coffee, the spare coat she left in the laundry room closet, the small photo of Marcus that sat on her nightstand in the maid's room, and even the little succulent plant she'd cared for over 3 years. Everything was carefully packed in a cardboard box. Next to the box, a white envelope with her name written in elegant handwriting she recognized immediately. With trembling hands, Denise opened the envelope and read the typed letter. Denise Washington, for personal and administrative reasons, your services are no longer required at this residence. Your last day of employment was yesterday, March 15th. No notice period is necessary. The amounts corresponding to prorated salary and vacation pay have been deposited into your account. We request that you collect your belongings today and return all property keys. Sincerely, Richard Peterson. Denise read the letter 3 times before the words made sense. Fired. After 5 years of service, after literally saving that man's life the day before, she was being dismissed without even a proper explanation. Her legs weakened, and she had to lean on the table to keep from falling. How would she tell Marcus? How would she pay the rent for the studio apartment, his college tuition that was almost finished, the basic bills for survival? At that moment, she heard footsteps coming down the marble stairs. Richard appeared, impeccably dressed in a navy blue suit, as if nothing had happened the day before. He looked at her with the same coldness as always. I trust you got the message, he said, adjusting his cuffs. And I also expect you to be discreet about the reasons for your dismissal. Denise stared at him, feeling anger rise in her chest. Reasons for dismissal? You're firing me because I saved you from drowning. Richard stopped fiddling with his cuffs and looked at her with an expression she'd never seen before. There was something dangerous in his eyes. You invaded my privacy. You touched me without permission. That could be interpreted in various but legal ways. Privacy, you were drowning. That's your version of events. Maybe I slipped, but I wasn't drowning. Perhaps you took advantage of the situation to... Well, who's going to believe a maid's word over mine? Denise felt the world spin. The cruelty behind those words was worse than any humiliation she'd ever faced. Take your things and leave. And Denise. Richard stepped closer, his voice low and threatening. It would be very harmful for you, and especially for your son Marcus, if this twisted version of events reached the wrong ears. Young lawyers need a clean reputation to get a job, don't they? The threat was clear. Denise picked up the box with her belongings, handed over the keys with trembling hands, and left that house for the last time, carrying not just her personal items, but also the weight of an injustice that seemed impossible to challenge. During the bus ride home, silent tears streamed down her face as she watched New York City pass by the window. 5 years of her life, 5 years of dedication, waking before sunrise, working late, enduring constant humiliation, all thrown away because she had saved the life of an ungrateful man. But what hurt her most wasn't the injustice of being fired. It was the certainty that Richard Peterson had coldly calculated every word of the threat. He knew exactly where it would hurt most: Marcus's future. The first week of unemployment was devastating. Denise had saved some money over the years, but not enough to last long without work, especially with Marcus's college tuition and the rent for their studio apartment eating up most of her savings. She walked around the neighborhood looking for work, visiting every home where she knew families might need a housekeeper. But something strange happened in every interview. The employers, who initially seemed interested in her services, changed their attitude as soon as she mentioned her previous job at Richard Peterson's house. "Oh, you worked for Mr. Peterson?" asked Mrs. Deborah, a 60-year-old woman living in a large house in Williamsburg. I've heard some things. I think I'll reconsider hiring." Denise didn't understand. What things? What stories were circulating about her? The answer came a week later when her former co-worker Tamika, who worked as a housekeeper in a home near Richard's, came to see her in her studio apartment. "Denise, I needed to tell you something," Tamika said, clearly uncomfortable. "Mr. Peterson is spreading stories about you. He says you took advantage of the situation when he fell in the pool, that you touched him inappropriately. Denise felt the ground drop beneath her. He's saying what? The employers in the neighborhood are all talking. They say you're dangerous, that you can't be trusted alone with men in the house. Denise, I know it's a lie, but no one will hire me now. Tamika nodded sadly. He has a lot of power in this neighborhood. People believe him. That night, Denise had to make a decision that broke her heart. She told Marcus everything, watching the anger grow in her son's eyes as she recounted every detail of what had happened. Mom, this is slander, defamation. We're suing this man. Marcus slammed his fist on the table, making the coffee cup jump. With what money, son? With what lawyer? You're still in school, and even after you graduate, how will a young lawyer take on someone with Richard Peterson's resources? Marcus fell silent, understanding the cruel reality of the situation. So what do we do? Denise took a deep breath. There was one option, one she had been avoiding. I'm going to sell meals on the street. I already spoke with Mrs. Mary, who has a cart in Union Square. She'll teach me the ropes. Mom, you can't. I can and I will. It's honest work, and until I find another housekeeping job, it's what will pay our bills. 2 weeks later, Denise was in Union Square at 6 in the morning, preparing meals in a rented cart. The transition from housekeeper to street vendor was brutal for her pride, but she adapted quickly. She needed to survive, and more importantly, she needed to make sure Marcus finished college. The work was grueling. Waking at 4 in the morning to prepare the food, pushing the heavy cart to the square, standing all day under sun or rain, competing with other vendors for every customer. But there was a dignity in that work she hadn't felt in years. No one humiliated her. No one treated her like a decorative object. The regular customers began to recognize her. Mr. Stanley, a retiree who bought lunch every day, always asked about Marcus. Ms. Heather, a nurse who worked at the nearby hospital, often chatted about the struggles of being a working woman in New York City. It was on a Tuesday in April, exactly 1 month after her dismissal, that Denise received an unexpected visit at home. Someone knocked on her door at 8 in the evening. When she opened it, she found a young process server, not much older than Marcus, holding a sealed envelope. Mrs. Denise Washington. That's me. Court summons. You have 15 days to hire a lawyer and file a defense. Denise took the envelope with trembling hands. When she closed the door and tore it open, she couldn't believe what she was reading. Richard Peterson was suing her for emotional distress, claiming that during the alleged rescue, she had violated his bodily privacy and touched intimate parts without consent. He demanded $50,000 in damages for the psychological and moral harm caused by the public embarrassment of the situation. The irony was so absurd, Denise had to read the document 3 times to be sure she wasn't dreaming. The man was suing her for saving him from drowning. When Marcus came home from college and read the summons, his reaction was explosive. That man is a psychopath. This is harassment. It's an abuse of power. Marcus, lower your voice. The neighbors will hear. I don't care if they hear. Mom, this is insane. No judge would ever accept a claim like this. Denise wasn't so sure. She knew how money and influence could twist the truth in the justice system, and more importantly, she knew she didn't have the resources to hire a good lawyer. We'll defend ourselves, Marcus said, determined. I know enough law for this. Son, you haven't graduated yet, and even if you knew everything, he'll hire the best lawyers money can buy. But Marcus was already flipping through his law books, searching for precedents and defense strategies. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us newcomers. Now, back to the story. The news of the lawsuit spread through Queens like wildfire. Other housekeepers, fearing similar situations could happen to them, began avoiding Denise. The twisted logic was simple. If a housekeeper could be sued for saving her employer's life, then any physical contact during work became a legal risk. Tamika was one of the few who stayed in touch, but always cautiously, always looking over her shoulder. Denise, the girls are scared. Mrs. Sharon told me she's terrified now of helping her employer when he's drunk. What if he falls and she gets sued for harassment? That's exactly what he wants, Denise replied. understanding for the first time the scope of Richard's plan. He's not just attacking me, he's sending a message to every housekeeper in the neighborhood. Stay in your place, don't dare cross the invisible line between employer and employee, not even to save a life. The first hearing was scheduled for a Friday in May. Denise woke up at 4 in the morning as usual, prepared her meals, worked until noon, and then rushed home to change and go to the courthouse. When she arrived at the court, wearing her only formal dress, the same one she wore to church on Sundays, she felt small and lost in the formal setting. Lawyers in suits walked the halls, speaking legal jargon she barely understood. Marcus met her at the courthouse entrance. He had skipped class to be with her, carrying an old briefcase full of papers and notes. "Mum, I studied the case all night. We have solid arguments." "What about his lawyer?" Marcus discreetly pointed to a middle-aged man, impeccably dressed, talking to 3 other lawyers near the courtroom entrance. "Mr. Edward Hamilton, one of the most expensive in New York City, specializes in defamation and emotional distress cases." Denise felt her stomach tighten. How could she compete with that? When they were called into the courtroom, Denise got a shock that nearly made her faint. Walking beside Mr. Hamilton, carrying a briefcase and wearing a flawless suit was Marcus. Not her Marcus, another Marcus, Jason Peterson. The lawyer Richard had hired to represent him in the case was his own son. Denise had to lean on her Marcus to keep from falling. The cruelty of the situation went beyond anything she had imagined possible. Richard hadn't just hired any expensive lawyer. He had specifically hired Jason Peterson, forcing him to sue a housekeeper, someone from the same social class as his own mother. "Mom, what's wrong?" Marcus whispered, seeing the paleness in her face. "Look who his lawyer is." Marcus looked and his expression changed completely. He knew Jason Peterson from law school. They were in the same class but from completely different worlds. Jason was the son of a businessman, drove an imported car, wore designer clothes. But he had always been polite to Marcus Washington, even lending him books when needed. Throughout the hearing, Jason kept his eyes down, reading his notes with exaggerated focus. When he had to present his opening arguments, his voice trembled, nothing like the confident student Marcus knew from school. "Your Honor," Jason said, his hands visibly shaking as he held the papers, "my client alleges that the defendant, taking advantage of her position of trust in the household and a moment of vulnerability, acted inappropriately and invasively." Denise watched the young lawyer speak and recognized something familiar in his posture. It was the same discomfort she felt when she had to do something against her conscience to keep her job. Jason was clearly being forced into this situation. The judge, a man around 55 named Judge William Harrison, listened with growing bewilderment. "Mr. Peterson," the judge interrupted, "I'm trying to understand the exact nature of the claim. Are you alleging that the defendant sexually assaulted your client while saving him from drowning?" Jason swallowed hard. "Not exactly a sexual assault, Your Honor, but non-consensual bodily invasion, causing emotional distress." "And what exactly was the nature of this distress?" "Well, she touched his body without permission. To save him from drowning." "Yes, but..." The judge leaned back in his chair, clearly disturbed by the direction of the hearing. "Counselor, are you aware that you're arguing someone can be sued for rescuing a person in mortal danger?" Jason couldn't answer right away. Denise saw a drop of sweat roll down his forehead. "The issue, Your Honor, is more complex." "No, Counselor, the issue is quite simple. One person was drowning, another saved them. Period. Who are the witnesses to this alleged embarrassment?" Jason Peterson checked his papers. "We have the testimony of the gardener, Mr. Terence Robinson, who witnessed the events." Denise knew Terence. He had worked for Richard for 15 years, had a family to support, and would never contradict his boss, even knowing he was lying. "And other witnesses?" The cook, Ms. Latoya Jones, was also present. Latoya had been Denise's friend for 3 years. They always talked about their children, their dreams, life's struggles. If she was testifying against Denise, it meant Richard had found a way to pressure her too. The hearing was adjourned so the witnesses could be heard the following week. Denise left the courtroom feeling like she was fighting an entire system, not just one man. On the bus ride home, Marcus was visibly shaken. "Mom, that guy, Jason Peterson, he didn't want to be there." You could tell he was being forced. "And does that change anything for us, son?" "Maybe. If we can prove he's being coerced." "Marcus, forget it. Let's focus on what we can control." But Denise was wrong to think she should dismiss Jason Peterson's situation. That same night, someone knocked on the door of her studio apartment. When she opened it, she found the young lawyer outside, clearly nervous and looking around as if he were being followed. "Mrs. Denise, can I come in?" Denise hesitated. She was talking to the opposing counsel, which could make her situation even worse. "I know it's strange, but I need to talk to you." Denise let him in. Marcus came out from the kitchen, recognizing his college classmate. "Marcus, what are you doing here?" Jason Peterson sat at the small kitchen table, burying his head in his hands. "I can't do this. I can't go on." "Do what?" Denise asked. "Sue you. I know it's a lie. I know my father is lying about everything." The revelation hit the small studio apartment like a bomb. "Your father? Richard Peterson is your father?" "Yes, and he forced me to take this case. Said if I didn't represent him in this lawsuit, he'd disinherit me and ruin my career before it even started. My father knows all the big law firms in New York City. One word from him, and I'd never get a job in the field." Marcus Washington sat beside his friend. "Man, that's blackmail. I know. But I have no choice. My mom, she left my dad last year. Found out he had huge debts, that he was falsifying company documents. She wants nothing to do with him. And I depend on him for everything. Apartment, car, allowance. Without it, I can't even finish school." Denise watched the two young men, both trapped in situations imposed by powerful men who manipulated their lives. "So what's the truth about what happened that day?" she asked. Jason Peterson lifted his head, looking straight at Denise. "My father really did drown. He can't swim, never could. The pool was my mum's idea when they were still married. He hates water but keeps the pool for status. That day, he was so focused on a business call, he didn't realize how close he was to the edge. When he slipped, he panicked completely." "So he lied about everything?" "Everything. He told me the truth because he needed me to know the real facts to build a smart defense, as he put it. But then he changed his story and said I had to stick to the initial petition." Denise sank heavily into her chair. "Why is he doing this to me?" Jason Peterson hesitated before answering. "Because you humiliated him." "How?" "You saved his life. A housekeeper, a woman he always saw as beneath him, saved the life of the great businessman Richard Peterson. That's unacceptable to his ego. He'd rather destroy the woman than admit he owes his life to someone he despises." The silence that followed was heavy with indignation and sadness. "But there's more," Marcus Peterson continued. "He's in serious financial trouble. The company is going bankrupt. He owes millions to banks and suppliers. My mother took half the assets in the divorce. He's desperate to keep up appearances. And where do I come into this? He has $1 million life insurance policy. If something happened to him, the company would be free of debt, and I'd inherit everything clean. I suspect the accident wasn't really an accident." Denise felt her blood run cold. "Are you saying that he might have thrown himself into the pool on purpose, hoping to drown to claim the insurance? But when you saved him, his plan fell through." Marcus Washington stood up abruptly. "That's attempted insurance fraud. That's—" "I can't prove anything," Marcus Peterson interrupted. "It's just suspicion. And even if I could, he's still my father. I still depend on him." Denise understood the complexity of the situation. The young man was torn between conscience and survival. "What do you want from me?" she asked. "I wanted you to know the truth, and I wanted to apologize for having to do this. At the next hearing, I'll have to question the witnesses and try to discredit your version. I'll have to act like I believe my father's lies." "I understand." "No, you don't. I'm destroying my own soul doing this. Every word I say in that courtroom against you will eat me up inside." Denise reached out and touched the young man's arm. "Marcus, you can still do the right thing." "And lose everything?" "And get your dignity back." Jason Peterson left the studio apartment even more troubled than when he arrived. Denise and her son spent the rest of the night discussing strategies. but both knew the revelation had made everything even more complicated. The following week, at the witness testimony hearing, Denise saw how power corrupts even the strongest friendships. Terence, the gardener, testified that he had seen Denise acting strangely around Richard by the pool. According to his version, the boss had just slipped and was being helped by him when Denise unnecessarily interfered. She grabbed the boss in a way that was, how can I say, kinda inappropriate, Terence declared, unable to look directly at Denise. Marcus Washington tried to cross-examine the witness. "Mr. Terence, how quickly did you get to the pool after the accident?" "Right away, young man. I heard the screams and ran." "And when you arrived, where exactly was Mr. Peterson?" Terence hesitated. He was at the edge of the pool." "At the edge or in the water?" "At the edge." "So, Mrs. Denise had already pulled him out of the water when you got there?" Maybe. And if she had already pulled him out, how can you claim she acted inappropriately during the rescue?" Terence had no answer. Jason Peterson, noticing the contradiction, tried to fix the situation during his rebuttal, but Denise could see in his eyes that he knew the witness was lying. LaToya, the cook, was even more painful to hear. Denise considered LaToya a true friend. They had shared stories about their children, the struggles of raising them alone, and their dreams of a better future. "Mrs. LaToya," Jason Peterson asked, "did you witness the incident at the pool?" "Yes, I did." "And what exactly did you see?" LaToya couldn't look at Denise. I saw her kinda clinging to the boss in a way that didn't seem just to save him, you know?" Denise felt as if she'd been punched in the gut. LaToya's betrayal hurt more than any humiliation Richard could inflict. During the court recess, Denise managed to speak briefly with LaToya in the courthouse bathroom. "LaToya, why are you lying?" "Denise, I can't. We've been friends for 3 years. You know my character." "Mr. Peterson, he found out about my Deshawn." Denise was confused. "What about Deshawn?" Deshawn was LaToya's youngest son, just 16. "He found out Deshawn sometimes takes small things from the store. Nothing major, a chocolate here, a soda there, typical teenager stuff. But Mr. Peterson said if I didn't testify in his favor, he'd file a police report against Deshawn. Said he'd make sure my boy was labeled a thief for life." Denise understood. Once again, Richard was using people who depended on him as pawns in his cruel game. "LaToya." "Denise, I can't let my boy be destroyed. You understand, right? You're a mother too." Denise understood perfectly, and that's why her anger toward Richard grew even stronger. He wasn't just attacking her, he was forcing innocent people to become accomplices to his lies. The hearing ended with a sense of defeat for Denise. The witnesses had lied, but their stories were consistent. The judge scheduled another hearing in a month for final arguments. Denise left the courthouse carrying a weight heavier than just the possibility of losing the case. She was witnessing how moral corruption spread like a disease, infecting good people and forcing them to act against their conscience. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps those of us just starting out. Now back to the story. In the weeks after the witness hearing, Denise's life grew even harder. The twisted version of events had spread through the whole neighborhood, and now she couldn't even sell her meals without facing judgmental stares and cruel whispers. Ms. Heather, the nurse who always bought lunch from her, approached one afternoon with a worried expression. "Denise, people are saying a lot of things about you. I don't believe it, but you won't buy food from me anymore either." Heather hesitated. "My supervisor at the hospital said it's not good for the institution's image to have employees associated with, well, people involved in scandals." "Scandals? I saved a man's life." "I know, Denise. I believe you. But people are saying other things." Denise realized Richard's strategy had worked perfectly. He didn't just need to win the lawsuit. He had destroyed her reputation so thoroughly that she'd become persona non grata in her own community. Her food cart sales plummeted. From 15 to 20 meals a day, she now sold only 5 or 6, mostly to customers who didn't know her story. The money didn't even cover ingredient costs. Marcus started skipping more classes to work nights as a food delivery driver, trying to make up for the lost family income. Denise saw the exhaustion growing on her son's face and felt she was destroying not just her own life but his dreams too. It was on one of those nights when Marcus came home exhausted after 8 hours riding a borrowed motorcycle that Denise made the hardest decision of her life. "Marcus, I'm dropping the case." "What do you mean, Mom?" "I'm accepting their settlement offer. I'll pay the damages he's demanding and end this." Marcus sank heavily into the kitchen chair. "Mom, we don't have $50,000. They offer payment plans. I'll pay $1,000 a month for 50 months. I'll work as a street vendor, a cleaner, a housekeeper. It doesn't matter. But I can't stand watching you work yourself to death because of my problems." "Mom, this is unfair. You saved that man's life. And that was my punishment. Sometimes life isn't fair, son. We have to accept it and move on." Marcus fell silent for a long moment, processing his mother's words. "No, I won't accept this." "Marcus." "Mom, I'm going to finish law school, even if I have to study through the night for the rest of the semester. And when I graduate, the first case I take as a lawyer will be yours. We're going to fix this. Son, by the time you graduate, I'll already owe a year's worth of payments. My life will already be ruined. Then we fight now. To the end." Denise looked at her son and saw a determination she recognized in her own eyes. Marcus had inherited her stubbornness, her refusal to bend to injustice. But how? The witnesses lied. His lawyer is one of the best in New York. "I have an idea, but you'll have to trust me." The next morning, Marcus skipped class again, but this time it wasn't for work. He went to the law firm where Jason Peterson was interning in downtown New York. He waited in the lobby until his classmate appeared for lunch. "Marcus, what are you doing here? I need to talk to you about the lawsuit." Jason glanced around nervously. "Man, I can't discuss this. It'd be unethical." "Unethical is what you're doing to my mother. Look, I know it's hard, but I know it's... Jason, I know you don't want to be part of this. You told me your father is lying about everything. Help me help my mom." Jason hesitated. "How?" "Get me a meeting with your mother." "My mother? Why?" "Because she knows your father better than anyone. And because she has reasons to want the truth to come out." Jason was silent for a long moment. "She lives in an apartment on the Upper East Side. She left my dad 6 months ago. She's suing him for hiding assets in the divorce." "Would she talk to me?" "I don't know. She's still hurt by everything that happened. But maybe, if she thinks it's about justice." That same afternoon, Marcus was buzzing the intercom of an elegant Upper East Side apartment. "Mrs. Victoria, my name is Marcus Washington. I'm Jason's classmate. I'd really like to talk to you about a situation involving your ex-husband." There was a long pause before the response. "Come up." Victoria Peterson was a woman in her 50s, elegant even in casual clothes. Her apartment was well decorated, but Marcus noticed many things seemed new, as if she'd had to start over from scratch. "Mr. Washington, my son told me about the lawsuit my ex-husband filed against your mother. It's a complicated situation." "Mrs. Victoria, my mother saved your ex-husband's life, and he's suing her for it. Don't you think that's wrong?" Victoria poured herself coffee and offered some to Marcus. "Mr. Washington, I lived with Richard Peterson for 22 years. Nothing he does surprises me anymore. Do you believe he actually planned to drown himself to claim the insurance?" Victoria froze, her cup halfway to her lips. "What?" Marcus recounted everything Jason had revealed in their conversation at his mother's studio apartment. Victoria listened silently, her expression growing graver. "That would explain a lot," she said finally. "How so?" "Richard increased his life insurance 3 months ago, right after I found out about the company's debts. When I questioned him, he said it was a normal precaution for a businessman, but $50 million in insurance seemed excessive to me." Marcus felt his heart race. "Do you have documents to prove this?" "I have copies of everything. My lawyer requested all financial records during the divorce proceedings. And would you be willing to testify about this?" Victoria fell silent for a long moment, staring out the apartment window. "Mr. Marcus, I still love my ex-husband, despite everything he's done. But what he's doing to your mother is too cruel, even by his standards. So you'd help us?" "I'll do more than that. I'll give you recordings of conversations I've had with Richard." Marcus couldn't hide his surprise. "Recordings? When I found out he was hiding assets from me during the divorce, I started recording our phone calls. It's legal. He knew he was being recorded. In several of those conversations, he admits to undeclared debts, talks about ways to defraud the divorce process and, well, he speaks about your mother in a way that makes it clear this lawsuit is personal retaliation." Marcus could hardly believe what he was hearing. "Would you be willing to submit these recordings to the court?" "On one condition." "What?" "That you promise not to use them to harm my son Jason. He's being forced to go along with this. I don't want his career destroyed. We only want to clear my mother's name. We have no interest in hurting anyone." Victoria stood and walked to a small safe in the wall. "There's one recording you need to hear. It was made 2 weeks ago, after the first hearing." She turned on a small digital recorder. Richard Peterson's voice filled the apartment. "Victoria, you don't understand. That maid humiliated me. A woman like her saving me. It's unacceptable. I'd rather spend $100,000 on lawyers than let this story spread as if I owed her anything." Victoria's voice replied, "Richard, this is ridiculous. The woman saved you from drowning. And it was the biggest mistake of her life. I'll destroy her, Victoria. I'll make her pay for touching me, for seeing me vulnerable, for witnessing my weakness. When I'm done with her, no maid in New York City will dare lay a hand on an employer, even to save his life." Marcus was stunned. The recording continued. "And one more thing, Victoria. If you think you're getting half my assets in this divorce, you're sorely mistaken. I'll declare bankruptcy before giving you a penny. And if necessary, I'll find a way to leave everything to Jason through the insurance." "Richard, are you talking about—" "I'm talking about taking necessary measures to protect the family's wealth. If something happens to me in the next few months, it won't be a coincidence. It'll be planned." The recording ended. Marcus was shaking. "Ms. Victoria, this is evidence of premeditated insurance fraud and of a vendetta against your mother. Richard makes it very clear the lawsuit has no legal basis. It's just revenge. You'll give this to us?" "I'll do more than that. I'll testify as a defense witness in your mother's case, and I'll bring all the recordings and documents I have." Marcus left Victoria's apartment with a folder full of documents and recordings that could completely change the course of the lawsuit. But he also carried a heavy weight on his shoulders. The information he'd received turned a simple defamation case into something far more complex and dangerous. When he got home and told Denise everything, she was silent for a long time. "Son, does this mean Richard actually tried to kill himself to commit insurance fraud?" "It looks that way, Mom. And when you saved him, you ruined his plan. That's why he's so furious." Denise felt strange. She had saved the life of a man who didn't want to be saved, who had planned his own dangerous situation for financial gain. "What now? What do we do with this information?" "Now we go to the final hearing and present all of this to the judge. And Jason Peterson? Will he keep representing his father?" "I don't know, Mom. I think it'll depend on how he reacts when he finds out we have this evidence." The answer came sooner than they expected. The next morning, Jason Peterson showed up at Denise's studio apartment before she even left for work. "Ms. Denise, I need to talk to you." This time, he seemed different, more resolved, less tormented. "My mother told me she spoke with Marcus yesterday. She told me about the recordings." Denise and Marcus exchanged glances. "I've made a decision," Jason continued. "I'm withdrawing from the case. But your father... My father can do whatever he wants to me. I won't keep representing him knowing what I know now. I won't be an accomplice to fraud and the harassment of an innocent person." Marcus Washington stepped closer to his colleague. "Man, this will destroy your relationship with your dad." "My relationship with my father is already destroyed. I was just pretending it wasn't." This morning I confronted him about the recordings. He didn't deny anything. He just said that if I betrayed him, he'd make sure to ruin my professional life before it even started. And you decided to betray him anyway. I decided to stop being his accomplice. That's not betrayal. It's conscience. Denise approached the young lawyer. Jason, I know what it's like to depend on someone to survive. I know what it's like to do things against your conscience just to keep food on the table. I won't judge you if you decide to keep representing your father. Ms. Denise, the difference between your situation and mine is that you never had a real choice. You always had to work to survive and support your son. I have a choice. I can work, I can support myself, I can pay for my own schooling. I just didn't want to lose my comfort. And now I'll find out what it's like to live without that comfort, and I'll find out what it's like to sleep peacefully with a clear conscience. Jason Peterson handed over a formal letter of withdrawal from the case, dated and signed. I'll file this today in court. The judge will have to give my father time to appoint a new lawyer. Won't that delay the case too much? Not by much, and it'll give you time to better organize your defense with the evidence my mother provided. When Jason Peterson left the studio apartment, Denise felt strangely relieved. It was comforting to know there were still people willing to do the right thing, even when it came at a high cost. But the relief didn't last long. That afternoon, while trying to sell her lunchboxes at Union Square, Denise got a call that chilled her to the bone. Denise, it's Latoya. I need to talk to you urgently. Latoya, I don't think... Denise, please. It's about Deshawn. Something terrible happened. Denise's stomach tightened. What happened? Mr. Peterson followed through on his threat. He filed a complaint against Deshawn with the police. My boy was taken to the precinct this morning. They said he could be charged with theft and have a criminal record for the rest of his life. Denise closed her eyes. Richard had somehow found out his strategy was compromised and decided to speed up his retaliation. Where are you now? At the precinct. Denise, I know what I did in court was wrong. I know I lied about you, but I was scared for my son. I know, Latoya. I understand. What do I do now? They said they'll only drop the charges if Mr. Peterson agrees. And he'll only agree if I keep the false testimony against you. Denise found herself facing an impossible situation. If she advised Latoya to change her testimony and tell the truth, her son would pay the price. If she told her to stick to the lie, Denise herself would continue to be unfairly targeted. Latoya, what's the name of the detective handling Deshawn's case? Detective Derek Wilson. Why? I'm coming over. We'll solve this together. Denise closed her food cart early and headed to the precinct where Deshawn was being questioned. He was a skinny 16-year-old with the frightened face of a teenager. When he saw Denise arrive, he didn't understand why the woman his mother had accused in court was there to help him. Deshawn, I know you must be confused, but I'm your mother's friend. We're here to fix this. Detective Derek Wilson was a middle-aged man who seemed tired of dealing with minor cases when more serious crimes demanded his attention. Detective, Denise addressed him respectfully, what exactly is Deshawn being accused of? Petty theft from stores. The complainant provided a list of alleged crimes committed by the minor over the last 6 months. Denise examined the list and almost laughed at how ridiculous it was. Richard had listed crimes like theft of a $3.50 chocolate bar, theft of a $2.80 soda, theft of a $4.20 pack of cookies. Detective, with all due respect, these amounts are trivial. What was the complainant's motivation for reporting these incidents? According to him, it's a matter of principle. He says theft is theft, no matter the amount. And did the stores where these supposed thefts occurred confirm the reports? The detective checked his papers. Actually, no. The complainant said he witnessed the events, but none of the businesses filed a police report at the time. Denise immediately understood the strategy. Richard had fabricated a list of petty thefts that would be impossible to prove, but served to pressure Latoya. Detective, I'd like to know if it's legal for someone to file a report on behalf of businesses when those businesses didn't request it. Well, technically, any citizen can report a crime they witnessed, even without evidence, even without victims confirming the crimes. The detective was starting to grow uneasy with the line of questioning. "What's your interest in this case, Ma'am?" "Denise Washington, and my interest is that a baseless accusation is being used against a minor to pressure his mother into lying in a legal case." Denise explained the whole situation to the detective, including the lawsuit Richard had filed against her, the witnesses' lies, and the blackmail he was using against LaToya. The detective listened with increasing attention. "Ms. Washington, these are very serious allegations. Do you have evidence to support your claims?" "I have recordings where Mr. Richard Peterson admits to targeting me out of personal revenge, and I have Deshawn's mother here who can confirm the threats he made against her son." LaToya confirmed everything, crying as she recounted how she'd been forced to lie in court. The detective asked to hear the recordings Mariana had provided. When he heard Richard's voice openly admitting he was pursuing Denise out of humiliation and would do whatever it takes to destroy her, his expression changed completely. "Ms. Washington, this changes everything. What we have here isn't just a case of petty theft by a minor. There are signs of misuse of the judicial system for personal vendettas, witness coercion, and false reporting. What does this mean for Deshawn? It means I'm dismissing the charges against him immediately. And that means I'll be opening an investigation against Mr. Richard Peterson for coercion and false accusation." LaToya hugged Denise, crying with relief. "Denise, forgive me for lying in court. I was so scared." "You don't need to apologize, LaToya. You're a mother. You did what any mother would do to protect her child. But now, what do I do? If I change my testimony, Mr. Peterson will be furious." The detective intervened. "Ms. LaToya, now that we have evidence of coercion, you're protected by the law. If Mr. Peterson tries to retaliate against you or your family, he'll be committing more crimes." "What about the false testimony I gave?" "Considering you were coerced, there will be no legal consequences, but you'll need to correct your testimony in Ms. Denise's case." Denise left the police station with a strange feeling. For the first time in months, she felt justice was on her side, but she also knew Richard wouldn't give up easily and would likely retaliate in other ways. The retaliation came faster than she expected. The next morning, when Denise arrived at Union Square to set up her food cart, she found a restless crowd and 2 City Hall trucks parked near her usual spot. "What's going on?" she asked Mrs. Mary, who had a fruit cart nearby. "Inspectors showed up saying they got a complaint about people selling food without a health permit here. They're fining everyone and confiscating the goods." Denise felt her blood run cold. She knew exactly who had made the complaint. An inspector approached her. "Do you have a food vendor's license?" Denise knew her situation wasn't legal. She'd started selling meals as an emergency solution, without time to get all the necessary permits. "No, sir. But then you can't sell food. I'll have to confiscate your goods and issue a fine." "Please, sir. This is my only income. I have a son in college." "Ma'am, I understand your situation, but the law is the law. You can go to City Hall to get your paperwork in order and then resume work." Denise watched as all her food was bagged up and taken away. The fine was $500, more than half of what she'd managed to save in recent weeks. When the inspectors left, Mrs. Mary approached her. "Denise, this was really strange. They knew exactly where to find you. They specifically asked for the woman who sells meals and is involved in a court case. Someone made a complaint targeting me. Who would do something like that?" Denise didn't answer, but she knew exactly who. That night, Marcus found her crying in the kitchen of their studio apartment. "Mom, what happened?" Denise told him about the cart being confiscated and the fine. This was Richard Peterson, wasn't it? Absolutely. He's escalating things because he knows we're not afraid anymore. "Mom, we'll report this too." "Marcus, how can we prove it was him? He's too smart to leave a trail." "We'll talk to Detective Wilson tomorrow. He's already investigating Richard. This could be more evidence of his pattern of harassment." Denise felt exhausted. Every small victory was followed by even crueler retaliation. It was like fighting an entire system designed to protect the powerful and crush the vulnerable. "Marcus, I'm thinking of giving up, accepting the settlement, paying the damages, moving to another city, starting a new life far from here." "Mom, if you do that, he wins." and other people will suffer what you're going through. But I can't take it anymore, son. I don't have the strength to keep fighting. Marcus knelt beside his mother's chair. Mom, do you remember what you taught me when I was little and other kids picked on me at school? What? You said that when we run from bullies, they only get worse. That the only way to stop a bully is to stand up to them no matter what, even if we get hurt in the process. Denise smiled sadly. I was braver back then, or maybe more naive. You're still brave, Mom. You saved the life of a man who hated you. That's courage. Now we just need to save our own lives. At the final hearing, 2 weeks later, Denise walked into the courtroom with a different feeling. She wasn't afraid anymore. She was tired, bruised, but determined to tell her truth to the end. Richard arrived with a new lawyer, even more expensive than the last one, Mr. Winston Carter, a partner at one of the biggest firms in New York City. His imposing presence contrasted with Marcus's simplicity, as he represented Denise with his college textbooks and a determination worth more than any diploma. Judge William Harrison seemed to have studied the case carefully during the break between hearings. Before we hear closing arguments, he said, I'd like to clarify some issues that arose during the proceedings. The judge looked directly at Richard. Mr. Peterson, this court has become aware of an ongoing police investigation against you for witness intimidation and false accusations. Is this true? Richard's new lawyer stood up. Your Honor, my client is not on trial for these alleged crimes in this case. We're here to judge the specific matter of emotional damages. Mr. Carter, when there's evidence that a lawsuit is being used for personal retaliation, it directly affects the legitimacy of the claims. Mr. Peterson, can you answer my question? Richard muttered an inaudible response. Louder, please. Yes, there's an investigation, but it has nothing to do with this case. We'll see. Ms. Denise, do you have new evidence to present? Marcus stood. Yes, Your Honor. We'd like to submit recordings where the plaintiff admits this lawsuit is motivated by personal revenge, not actual damages suffered. Richard's lawyer immediately objected. Objection. Unauthorized recordings are inadmissible. Marcus was prepared. Your Honor, the recordings were made by the plaintiff's ex-wife with his knowledge during phone calls related to their divorce proceedings. They're completely legal. The judge allowed the recordings to play. Richard's voice echoed through the courtroom. That maid humiliated me. A woman like her saving me. That's unacceptable. I'd rather spend $100 grand on lawyers than let this story spread like I owe her anything. The silence that followed was heavy. Richard was visibly shaken, his face red with anger and shame. The judge requested the full recording. When it reached the part where Richard talked about finding a way out of this life, through insurance, the magistrate stopped it. Mr. Peterson, can you explain what you meant by those words? That was taken out of context. I was upset about the divorce. Were you discussing committing insurance fraud? Richard's lawyer tried to intervene, but the judge silenced him with a gesture. Mr. Peterson, answer the question. I didn't plan anything, it was just venting. Venting about insurance fraud. Richard couldn't respond. The judge leaned back in his chair, clearly troubled by what he'd heard. Mr. Carter, does your client have anything further to declare? Your Honor, we request the suspension of this hearing until my client can properly consult with me about... Denied. We will proceed with the closing arguments. Marcus stood to make his final defense. Denise watched him and felt immense pride. The boy she had raised alone, working as a housekeeper, was now defending her with the skill of any seasoned lawyer. Your Honor, Marcus began, this case represents more than a simple dispute between two people. It represents a fundamental test about what kind of society we want to be. Proceed, Counselor. The central question is, in what kind of society can a person be sued for saving another's life? In what kind of justice system can an act of heroism be turned into grounds for persecution? Marcus walked across the courtroom, gesturing naturally. The evidence clearly shows that my client, Mrs. Denise Washington, acted as any decent person would upon seeing someone drowning. She risked her own life to save her employers. And what was her reward? Termination the next day, slander in the community, and a baseless lawsuit. Counselor, focus on the legal aspects of the matter. Yes, Your Honor. Legally, what we have here is a clear case of bad faith litigation. The plaintiff admitted in a recording that he filed this lawsuit out of personal vengeance, not actual damages. He admitted he'd rather spend fortunes on lawyers just to humiliate my client. Marcus stepped closer to the defense table. Even more seriously, evidence suggests the alleged accident in the pool may have been an attempted insurance fraud. If true, then my client not only saved the plaintiff's life, but also prevented him from committing a crime. Richard's lawyer stood abruptly. Objection. That's speculation. Sustained, said the judge. Counselor Marcus, stick to the proven facts. My apologies, Your Honor. Focusing only on the proven facts, the recordings show the plaintiff is using the justice system to harass an innocent person. Witnesses admit they were coerced into lying. The pattern of harassment includes sabotaging my client's job and threatening witnesses. Marcus turned directly to the judge. Your Honor, this case goes beyond the $50,000 being demanded. It's about whether we'll allow powerful people to weaponize the justice system to destroy the vulnerable. It's about whether saving a life can become grounds for persecution. Marcus returned to his table and picked up a sheet of paper. That's why we're not just asking for dismissal. We're asking that the plaintiff be held liable for bad faith litigation, that he cover court costs and legal fees, and that an investigation be ordered into potential witness coercion. When Marcus finished speaking, Denise had tears in her eyes, not of sadness, but pride. The son she had raised with so much sacrifice was there, defending not just her, but all workers daily humiliated by arrogant employers. Richard's lawyer gave his closing arguments, trying to downplay the recordings and insisting the lawsuit had legal merit. But it was clear he was fighting a losing battle. The judge announced he would deliver his verdict in a week. Before adjourning, he said, I'd like to make some observations. In 20 years on the bench, I've rarely seen a case where the motivations behind a lawsuit were so plainly exposed. The judge looked directly at Richard. Mr. Peterson, regardless of my ruling on this case's merits, I hope you reflect on your actions, Mrs. Denise Washington saved your life. That should warrant eternal gratitude, not persecution. Richard kept his eyes down throughout the judge's speech. This hearing is adjourned. During the following week, Denise tried to return to her routine, but it was impossible to focus on anything. Their entire future depended on the decision that would be announced. Marcus spent his days studying for his final college exams, which would take place right after graduation. Ironically, he was about to become a lawyer in the same week he would find out if he had successfully defended the first case of his career. On Friday, the day of the verdict, Denise woke up at 5 in the morning, even though she had nothing specific to do. The anxiety wouldn't let her sleep. They arrived at the courthouse an hour early. To Denise's surprise, they found several familiar faces at the entrance: Ms. Heather, the nurse who had stopped buying her meals, Tamika, her old co-worker, even Mrs. Mary from the fruit stand in Union Square. What are you all doing here? Denise asked. We came to support you, said Ms. Heather. When we heard what happened, how that man lied about you, we were ashamed we believed the gossip. Denise, Tamika said, we domestic workers need to stick together. If we let an employer destroy one of us just for doing the right thing, tomorrow it could be any of us. Denise was moved to see she wasn't alone. Even if she lost the case, she had regained something far more valuable: the trust of her community. When they were called to hear the verdict, the courtroom was packed. Besides Denise's acquaintances, there were journalists interested in the unusual case of the housekeeper being sued for saving her employer's life. Judge William Harrison entered the room carrying a thick folder. It was clear he had spent considerable time drafting his decision. Case of Denise Washington versus Richard Peterson, he announced. Claim for moral damages. Denise held Marcus's hand, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure the whole courtroom could hear it. After a detailed review of all evidence presented, the recordings submitted, witness testimonies, and the circumstances surrounding this case, I now proceed to the ruling. The judge paused, looking at Richard and then at Denise. I find the claim filed by Richard Peterson against Denise Washington entirely without merit. Denise's legs nearly gave way from relief. Marcus squeezed her hand tightly, but the judge wasn't finished. More than that, I find the plaintiff guilty of bad faith litigation as stipulated in the Civil Procedure Code. The evidence unequivocally demonstrates that this lawsuit was filed solely to harass and humiliate the defendant, with no legal or factual basis. Richard was visibly tense in his seat. Therefore, I order Richard Peterson to pay a fine for bad faith litigation amounting to 20% of the claim's value, that is, $10,000. He is also ordered to cover court fees and the opposing party's legal expenses, totaling $5,000. Denise could hardly believe what she was hearing. Not only had she won the case, but Richard would have to pay $15,000. Furthermore, the judge continued, I direct that a full copy of these proceedings be forwarded to the District Attorney's Office for investigation into potential witness coercion, slanderous accusations, and misuse of the judicial system. The judge addressed Richard directly. Mr. Peterson, I hope this decision serves as a reflection on the fundamental values of gratitude and justice. Ms. Denise Washington is a hero, not a criminal. She deserves recognition, not persecution. Finally, the judge looked at Denise. Ms. Washington, I want to congratulate you not only for your courage in saving a life, but also for your determination to fight for justice. The judicial system exists to protect people like you from the kind of abuse you suffered. When the judge banged the gavel to adjourn the session, the courtroom erupted in applause. Denise was crying, but this time they were tears of joy and relief. Marcus hugged her tightly. Mom, we did it. We won. No, son. Justice won. Tamika and the other housekeepers came over to embrace Denise. Ms. Heather was crying too. Denise, forgive me for doubting you, for stopping to buy your meals. There's no need to apologize. You didn't know the truth. Throughout the celebration, Denise watched Richard leaving the courtroom with his lawyer. He looked broken, a far cry from the arrogant man who had humiliated her for 5 years. For a moment, Denise pitied him, not because he didn't deserve the punishment, but because he had destroyed himself with his own cruelty. 3 months after the verdict, Denise's life had completely changed. With the settlement money, she was able to legalize her street vending business, obtaining all the necessary permits. Her clientele had tripled after the story went public. Many people made a point of buying her meals to support her. Marcus graduated from law school with one of the highest grades in his class. His defense in his mother's case had impressed several professors, and he received internship offers from prestigious firms. But the most significant change wasn't financial. Denise had regained her dignity and her faith in justice. One day, while preparing meals in her newly rented kitchen, she received an unexpected visitor. It was Jason Peterson. Ms. Washington, I hope you don't mind my visit. Of course not, Jason. Come in. The young lawyer seemed different, more mature, more confident. I wanted to tell you that I got a job at a firm that represents domestic workers. Cases about labor rights, workplace harassment, things like that. That's wonderful, Jason. I'm happy for you. It was because of your case that I realized what kind of law I want to practice. I want to defend people like you against people like my father. Denise smiled. And how is your relationship with your father? Jason sighed. He lost almost everything. His company went bankrupt, the house was sold to pay debts, and he's living in a small apartment now. The police investigation led to a conviction for witness tampering. He's serving community service. Do you two talk? Sometimes. He's different, more humble. I think losing everything made him reflect on the choices he made in life. Denise was curious. Different how? He asked me for your phone number, said he wants to speak with you in person. Denise was surprised. Speak with me, why? He didn't tell me. Just asked if I thought you'd be willing to talk to him. Denise thought for a moment. Tell him I accept, but in a public place with you present. A week later, Denise was sitting in a simple diner in downtown New York City, waiting for Richard Peterson to arrive. Jason was by her side, visibly nervous about the meeting between his father and the woman he had pursued for months. When Richard walked into the diner, Denise barely recognized him. The arrogant, impeccably dressed man had been replaced by someone thinner, with graying hair, simple clothes, and a hunched posture that suggested the weight of many regrets. He approached the table slowly, as if every step took immense effort. "Ms. Washington, thank you for agreeing to speak with me. Sit down, Richard." He sat, keeping his eyes down. I don't even know where to begin." Denise Washington waited in silence. "I came here to apologize. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I know I caused terrible suffering for you and your family, but I need you to know that I deeply regret everything I did." "Go on." "Mrs. Washington, you saved my life, literally, and I repaid that generosity with cruelty. There's no explanation, no justification. It was pure malice on my part." Richard Peterson finally raised his eyes and looked directly at Denise. "I wanted you to know that you saved me twice." "How so?" "The first time was in the pool. The second was when you sued me and exposed who I really was, losing everything, being publicly humiliated, serving community service. That forced me to look in the mirror and see the monster I'd become." Denise listened quietly, trying to gauge if the remorse was genuine. "What happened to me these past months made me understand things I should have realized long ago. It made me value people I'd always looked down on. It made me see that dignity has nothing to do with money or power." "And what do you plan to do with this new understanding?" "I want to propose something to you, something that might seem strange coming from me." Denise waited. "I have experience in administration, business management. I know you've expanded your meal delivery business and that it's doing well. I'd like to propose a partnership." Jason Peterson shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Dad, this isn't appropriate." "Let him speak," said Denise. "It wouldn't be a partnership where I'm the boss and you're the employee. It would be equal. I'd contribute administrative knowledge and startup capital. You'd bring your culinary expertise and business know-how. 50-50 in everything." Denise was genuinely surprised. "Why would you do this?" "Because I need to do something good with the rest of my life. Because I need to try to make amends, even if just a little, for the harm I caused. And because I recognize you have qualities I never had and never will." "What qualities?" "Honesty, courage, the willingness to sacrifice for others, dignity even in adversity. You're everything I should have been and never was." Denise looked at Jason Peterson, who seemed as stunned as she was by his father's proposal. "I need to think about it." "Of course, and if you decide against it, I'll completely understand. But I want you to know the offer is sincere. It would be a privilege to work with you as an equal." After the meeting, Denise talked at length with her son about the proposal. "Mom, do you trust him?" "I don't know if I trust him, but I think he's changed. The question is, would it be good for us?" "Financially, it'd be great. With his business experience and an initial investment, you could open a real restaurant." "And personally?" "Personally, it'd be complicated." Denise spent a week reflecting on the proposal. She spoke with Tamika, with Ms. Heather, even LaToya, who had become an even closer friend after the trial. They all had mixed opinions, but they agreed on one thing. The decision had to be entirely Denise's. At the week's end, Denise called Jason Peterson and asked to arrange another meeting with Richard. This time she went alone. "Richard, I've thought a lot about your proposal." "And?" "I accept, but with conditions." "What are they?" "First, it's truly 50-50, in decisions, profits, responsibilities. No favors or privileges." "Agreed." "Second, if at any point I feel you're treating me with disdain or arrogance again, the partnership ends immediately." "Agreed." "Third, it's not just business. It's a chance to prove people from different backgrounds can work together with mutual respect. If you're doing this just to clear your conscience, you'd better give up now." Richard remained silent for a long moment. "Mrs. Denise, I can't guarantee I'm a completely changed man. I'm still learning to be different. But I can promise I'll try every day to be worthy of your trust." "Then let's try." 6 months later, Denise and Richard were partners in a small restaurant in Queens called Crossroads. The name had been Denise's idea, a place where people from different backgrounds could meet as equals. The restaurant specialized in homemade Brazilian food, prepared with recipes Denise had perfected over the years. Richard handled the administrative and financial side, but always consulted Denise on every major decision. The partnership wasn't perfect. There were moments of tension, disagreements about business strategies, communication struggles. But gradually, a relationship of mutual respect developed. Marcus graduated and opened his own law firm specializing in labor rights. His first office was on the second floor of the building where his mother's restaurant operated. Jason Peterson became a junior partner at the firm, focusing on cases of domestic workers who suffered abuse from their employers. A year after the restaurant opened, Denise was in the kitchen preparing the daily special when Tamika rushed in. "Denise! Denise! You need to see this!" "What is it?" "There's a TV crew outside. They want to interview you." Denise stepped out of the kitchen and found a news team at the restaurant's entrance. "Mrs. Denise Washington, we're from NBC. We'd like to do a story about your journey for 60 minutes. Denise was speechless. The segment aired on a Sunday night and told the whole story. The rescue at the pool, the legal battle, the courtroom victory, and the unlikely partnership between the former employee and former employer. The program ended with footage of the packed restaurant, customers from all walks of life eating together and chatting animatedly. The host concluded, "Denise Washington's story teaches us that saving a life can transform two lives, and that forgiveness, when genuine, has the power to turn enemies into partners." After the broadcast, the restaurant was packed for weeks. People came from all over New York City to meet Denise and taste her food. But what moved Denise most were the letters she received from domestic workers across the country, sharing their own stories of humiliation and thanking her for having the courage to fight. One letter in particular stayed with her. "Mrs. Denise, my name is Brenda Turner. I work as a maid in Chicago. When I saw your story on TV, I cried so much. For 5 years, I've endured humiliation from an employer who treats me like I'm invisible. But after seeing how you faced something much worse, I decided to find a lawyer to defend my rights. You gave me the courage to stop accepting being treated as less. Thank you for showing us we have value too." Denise kept that letter in a special drawer, along with dozens of others like it. 2 years after the restaurant opened, Richard asked to speak with Denise privately. They sat at a reserved table after closing. "Denise, there's something I need to tell you." "What is it?" "I want to thank you." "Thank me for what?" "For giving me a second chance, for believing I could change, for teaching me what dignity really means." Denise smiled. "Richard, you changed because you wanted to. I just gave you the opportunity." "No, Denise, it was more than that. You taught me that real strength doesn't come from power over others, but from the ability to lift others up." Richard paused. "I want you to know that these 2 years working with you have been the best of my life. For the first time, I'm proud of what I do. And I'm proud of the person you've become. Denise, I have a request." "What is it?" "I want us to consider expanding the business, but not to make more money. I want to open a culinary school to train other housekeepers, give them a career alternative, a chance at independence." Denise was moved by the proposal. "You've really changed, Richard. I learned from the best teacher." End of story. This story shows us how an act of courage can transform lives in unexpected ways. Denise saved Richard twice, first from drowning, then from his own cruelty. Sometimes the greatest victories come not from revenge, but from forgiveness and the ability to see the potential for change in everyone. What did you think of this story of resilience and transformation? Could you see how Denise kept her dignity even in the toughest moments? Tell us in the comments which part moved you the most, and if you know a similar story. Your opinion means a lot to us. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel.